We see a young boy named Prival running through an open field when he notices a rocky bird in the air. It's unusual to see one flying around here, so he summons his grandfather, who has never skipped arm day, to assist him in catching the bird for dinner. With nothing else at his disposal, the old man grabs a pitchfork and hurls it several stories into the air, effortlessly dispatching the bird. Prowl isn't about to let that meat slip through his fingers as the bird falls off a cliff. He leaps off the cliff and catches himself on a rock just in time to avoid falling to his death. They then returned inside, where Grandpa delegated the preparation of the bird to Pell, who did it all with one hand. They then sit down to eat the perfectly cooked meat. We can see some ominous purple magic on the bird in the background, which I'm pretty sure isn't a good sign. After they finish eating, they go outside for a light sparring match, which Grandpa wins after a brief struggle. Prival, on the other hand, takes some pride in knowing that he put up a good fight against him. While Pell is still celebrating, Grandpa goes to wash the dishes, but he suddenly remembers something very important. Prowl's birthday is approaching, and he has completely forgotten about it. He abandons everything and returns to the house to find Prowl, who is currently taking a leak. He informs him that it is his birthday tomorrow, but he appears uninterested and has forgotten how old he was before this conversation. He'll be 16 tomorrow, which means he'll be considered an adult in this world. He's overjoyed because he believes it means he can finally drink some beer. But even though he is old enough to pay taxes and join the army, he is still too young to drink alcohol. Grandpa takes him to the top of the cliff and shows him the vast expanse of space that extends beyond this island, just waiting to be explored, with places to see and things to do, and perhaps even the One Piece. Prowl, on the other hand, is unconcerned about any of this, and simply wishes to continue his daily routine on this island with Grandpa. That night, while they eat dinner, Grandpa tells them about Pell's father, who went on adventures as soon as he turned 16. But, as far as Prowl knows, his father is no longer alive. Still, Grandpa wonders if Prowl isn't lonely after all of his time on this remote island, but he is perfectly content because he has Grandpa with him. Later that night, unable to sleep, he goes outside to gaze at the stars. He is so enthralled by all of the wonderful things that his grandpa has told him about that he can't sit still. However, he is content with his current situation because he has his grandpa with him, and he does not wish to change that. That, my friends, is a death flag if I've ever seen one. Prowl falls asleep and awakens to find this knight in his floating boat approaching the island. The knight was discussing how his rock bird had been shot down earlier, implying that the person he is looking for is probably here. Pell approaches him and expresses his surprise at seeing a knight in a flying boat. The knight says he's looking for someone named Vargas, and Prowl, who has no fear of strangers, tells him that's the name of his grandfather and asks how he knows him. The knight claims to have known Vargas 16 years ago when he was still a holy knight, and he has come to visit him. Prowl doesn't question anything he says, such as why a friend would come to see him in full battle gear, or why Grandpa would not bring up such a close friend in conversation. So he informs the knight that Grandpa is currently preparing breakfast on the other side of the hill. After gathering the necessary information, the knight proceeds to confront Vargas while telling Prowl that he can keep himself entertained by playing on this flying boat. Prowl is overjoyed at first and is having a great time in the boat, but he gradually realizes that everything that has just happened was a ruse, and that he has just told a stranger in a suit of armor and a sword where his grandfather is. It finally dawns on him that he may have made a huge mistake. He dashes over to assist his grandfather. Meanwhile, on the other side of the mountain, Vargas was busy cutting up some carrots for breakfast when the knight walked up behind him and pointed out that he was cutting up vegetables with the sword he used as a holy knight. Vargas recognizes the voice and knows that the KN does not talk for the first 5 minutes of a fight, so he uses his sword to block the incoming strike, but is blown back into his house. He is mostly unscathed, so he jumps out and charges forward to counterattack the knight. Their swords clash, but Vargas is unable to penetrate the knight's defense, and once an opening is created, the knight uses his power to transform Vargas into the new Twitter logo and destroy his house for extra points. Prowl had arrived a little late and had just seen his grandfather being carved out, so he yelled at the knight to stop. The knight, obviously unwilling to comply, fires a shot at Prowl, telling him that he is next in line to die at his hands. Before jumping down, Prowl grabs one of the rocks launched by the blast and throws it at the knight. Because the rock did not cause any damage, Prowl tries again with a larger rock, but it still does nothing, and Prowl is now in the direct line of fire for one of those shots. Grandpa appears from behind him and stops the knight from shooting Prowl. He then yells at him to flee while he still has the chance, but Prowl refuses to leave his beloved grandfather to die here. The knight, on the other hand, has no intention of letting either of them leave alive. As he says this, he slashes Vargas open several more times in an instant, and then hits Pell with an overkill blast. Prowl is about to retreat, but he uses the last of his strength to punch the knight. His little arms, however, aren't going to do much damage, and he coughs up some blood before being punted backward and falling to his feet, looking up at the sky as it begins to snow. Vargas asks the knight why he has come here to kill him now of all times, and he explains that a prophecy foretold a few days ago that 4 Knights of the Apocalypse would bring the Lord King Arthur's downfall. They have no idea who the Knights of the Apocalypse are, so he figured he might as well come here and kill Vargas just in case. Even if that was his reasoning, he shouldn't have killed Prowl in that manner, but he claims it was all for the greater good. Prowl stands up and apologizes to his grandfather for being too weak to protect him. But I'm more interested in how his body survived the blast that went in, out, and through a mountain behind him. His grandfather tells him that he should not have to protect someone like him, and that he should look for someone more deserving. Prowl believes that this is divine punishment for lying about his desire to stay on the island forever and not go on an adventure. To calm him down, Vargas admits that he was ecstatic when Prowl said he was perfectly content, just staying with him here. Prowl smiles a little, but Vargas coughs up more blood, reminding him that he doesn't have much time left. He has something he'd like to say before he dies. So he informs Prowl that the knight's name is Ironside, and that he is Pell's father. Pell is taken aback by this because, for one thing, Vargas told him that his father died when he was younger, and for another, what kind of father would slice his own son into 4 pieces just in case? This backstory is too lengthy for Grandpa to begin explaining right now, so he instructs Pell to seek out Ironside if he wishes to learn the full story. He's sorry, but Prowl will have to embark on his new journey alone. It will be difficult for him for the first time, but Vargas knows he can handle it because he raised Pell to be tough. Prowl wakes up the next day and looks over at his dead grandpa, which fills him with deep sadness. He buries his body and is left feeling empty inside because his entire world has just collapsed in front of him. He begins repairing some of the house's damage and discovers a box beneath a table. It contains a new set of clothes that Vargas had spent several nights sewing for Prival to wear on his adventures. Prowl has been working on a memorial to his grandfather for a few days. He puts on the helmet and flicks back his cape as he prepares to embark on his journey, only to trip on that same cape. Prowl begins his descent of the island, but after an entire day of climbing, he has made almost no progress. He can't see beyond the clouds. He finally sees the ground after a little more climbing, but in his excitement, he lets go of the cliff and falls to the ground. He discovers this creature there. He looks up at the creature, recalling how he had never seen anything like it on the island. He also introduces himself to it, explaining that he has just climbed down from the tall island behind him and is looking for a place where other people like him can live. But it doesn't seem to understand a word he just said and starts walking away from him. Prowl continues to pursue it, causing it to flee, eventually leading him to a street-performing group. Katz, the group's leader, throws the paper into the air and causes it to catch fire, while Elva performs a trick with a disappearing monkey in a hoop. Katz now wants the last guy to do his trick, but he doesn't want to practice because no one can see him. Prowl, on the other hand, was watching and was blown away by their incredible routine. Because they are currently in the middle of nowhere, the others are perplexed as to where a kid like Prowl could have come from. Prowl wants them to perform some more magic tricks, so Donnie takes advantage of the situation and attempts to get Prowl to pay them for it. Prowl, on the other hand, has spent his entire life on a single island and has no idea what paying entails. Donnie then says he'll take Prowl's belongings as payment for performing his trick, so he pulls the trick and makes Prowl float, much to his delight and amazement. But while Prowl was having fun, Donnie had already loaded the others into the cart and was fleeing with Prowl's belongings. The others tell him that what he just did was wrong and that he shouldn't have left a kid like that alone in the forest after taking his belongings. Donnie realizes that such behavior puts him squarely in the jackass category, and he's about to turn around when Prowl shoots past him at breakneck speed. Donnie apologizes after sprinting to catch up to them, not only because he realizes what he did was wrong, but also because he fears for his life after Prowl's incredible feat of strength. Prowl informs them that he is looking for someone and inquires as to how he can locate that person. He tells them that the person he's looking for goes by the name Ironseed, but they have no idea who that could be. When they inquire as to why he is looking for this person, Prowl explains that Ironside is his father and also murdered his grandfather. As a result, they believe he is out for vengeance. Prowl isn't sure if he wants revenge or not, which is why he wants to confront Ironside and ask him why he killed Grandpa and why he's only now showing up. He has a lot of questions he wants answered, but for now, all he wants to do is beat him up. The group doesn't recognize the name, but they're heading to a village soon. So if he goes with them, he might be able to find some information there. Prowl is overjoyed, but Donnie says they won't take him for free. However, this time, he simply asks Pell to perform a trick so that he can accompany them. They give him a bow and an arrow to see how well he can aim, but he almost hits Donnie, who is standing behind him. They still take Prowl because they are a performing troupe and must travel to the village for their next performance. Prowl asks if the tricks he saw them do before with their performance were amazing and looked exactly like magic. Donnie, on the other hand, dislikes having to perform petty magic tricks for a living. Katz explains that they are a group of people whose dreams of becoming holy knights have been dashed. When the subject of holy knights comes up, Prowl recalls Ironside mentioning that both he and Prowl's grandpa were previously holy knights. The others are surprised to hear this because it means he is the holy knight's son. They inquire as to what country Ironside is supposed to be from, but Prowl has no idea what a country is, so he is unable to respond. Just then, two villagers come running up to them, pleading for assistance. Because their village is being attacked by a wolf, they ask Donnie to ride his horse to summon some holy knights. But because he believes it is just a regular wolf, he believes they should be able to get rid of it on their own, and in exchange, the villagers will provide them with food and a place to stay for the night. However, upon arrival, he realizes that the wolf is too much for them to handle and flees to summon the holy knights. Prowl jumps out of the cart as they flee to deal with the wolf because there are still people in danger here. Donnie believes it is suicide for him to go in and fight that thing alone when he is only a child, but Prival does not want anyone to suffer, so he will make every effort to protect them. He takes a stance and declares that he will kill and eat the wolf, so he draws his arrows and fires 2 shots at them. However, his accuracy stat is at 100. So his arrows fly back at him, striking him in the head and pinning his cape to the ground. The wolf is about to strike Prowl, but Donnie intervenes and saves him. He is knocked back and injured, so Prowl becomes enraged and decides to abandon the bow in favor of what he is good at his hands. After deflecting the wolf's second strike, he leaps to his feet and slaps the instincts and consciousness out of them, stunning everyone and knocking the wolf to the ground. As everyone begins to rejoice that they are safe, we notice one of the wolf's familiar crests, and the creature who first met him is watching from a nearby cliff through a magical crystal. A knight is surprised that Prowl was able to defeat one of his familiars, so he will confront him directly next. Back in the village, the villagers are discussing how unusual it is for a monster of that size to appear in a village. And to make matters worse, there have been reports of similar things happening in neighboring villages, so they are concerned. Katz is bandaging Donnie's wounds to protect Prowl, and he inquires about Prowl's whereabouts, being told that he was taken by Elva to the lake to wash up a bit. Elva is shocked by Prowl's scar on his chest in the lake, and she is even more shocked when the scar runs all the way through to his back. This brings up the question once more: how the hell did he survive that by just sleeping it off? Elva tells Prowl that despite such a terrible wound, he acts pretty mature for his age because she still believes he is a child. But Prowl is too busy looking at her and wondering why something is missing. Prowl is soaking in the lakey a short time later, thinking about how Donnie is actually a pretty nice guy, because he jumped in to protect him, despite only knowing him for a few minutes. Elva tells him, as he rests his head on the legendary cushions, that Donnie probably did it because seeing Prowl jump in to save the people riled him up. Doing so gives the impression that he hasn't given up on becoming a holy knight yet. When Prowl asks what a holy knight is, she explains that they are people who use their great magical power to oppose evil and uphold justice. He then inquires as to what magic is, and whether it has anything to do with the tricks they were performing earlier. She tells him that it's similar, but their power is far too weak to be considered sufficient to become a holy knight. When they return to the village, everyone wants to celebrate their hero, so they all raise a glass to Prowl. He thinks the drink is really tasty. He inquires as to what it is and is informed that it is berry juice. Donnie says he would have liked some alcohol, but Elva points out that he, like her, is only 16 years old. Prowl overhears this and informs them that he too is 16, which causes Elva to flush with embarrassment after what she did with Prowl in the lake. In any case, they continue the celebration and party for a while. Prowl then begins to ask around to see if anyone has heard of Ironside, but no one seems to know anything about him, which greatly frustrates him. He yells at the top of his lungs for Ironside to appear, but Elva tells him that it's pointless to yell because he's not here to hear him. Someone else, however, hears Prowl screaming for Ironside and says he recognizes the name. The Black Knight has arrived. He comes down from his floating shield and tells how he came here to find the kid who killed his familiar, but instead discovers that Prowl, who was said to be dead, is still alive. He wonders if Varghese survived as well, but Varghese did not have the same level of plot armor as Prowl and died from his wounds. Katz recognizes him as a holy knight and attempts to persuade him to leave Prowl alone, but Pegard pushes him away. The Holy Knight apologizes for hitting Cat so hard, saying he was only trying to push him away a little and didn't mean to injure him. Prowl questions the Knight about knowing his grandfather and Ironside. When Prowl questions the Knight about knowing his grandfather and Ironside, he explains that he is Peagard, a man who knew both his father and grandfather. If he recognizes Ironside, Pell tells him that he has until the count of 5 to tell him where he is, while Peagard is busy telling Prowl how much he admires him for not being afraid to face a Holy Knight. Because talking isn't getting them anywhere, Prowl and Peagard prepare to fight. The crowd is wise and flees before becoming entangled in what is sure to be a chaotic battle. Prival charges forward, surprising Peagard because he is unarmed, but as he lands a kick on him and manages to push him back with his heavy armor, he is thoroughly impressed by the boy's potential. Prowl says that if he wins, Peagard must tell him where Ironside is, and Peagard agrees. However, as he knocks Prowl down, he creates conditions in which, if he wins, Prowl must accompany him and train under him to maximize his potential. He then strikes Prowl with his mace, but he blocks the blow and leaps forward to strike him again. He then unleashes a barrage of attacks on Prowl, only to have his head palmed. Prowl commends Prowl for having the courage to put himself in danger to protect the weak and the determination not to falter. But he tells him to take the fight seriously, and, if he isn't going to use a weapon, to at least use magic. But Prowl says he doesn't have any magic to use, which surprises him, but gives him even more reason to train Prowl. He begins punching him in an attempt to get him to admit defeat and accompany him to be trained. But Prowl refuses to give up. It's being punched repeatedly while all the villagers look on, knowing there's nothing they can do to stop it until one boy screams for Prowl to keep fighting and gives him the motivation to unleash his magical power. Prowl believes he was duped because Prowl told him he had no magic, but right now, it appears to be magic. This marked the conclusion of episode 2. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe so you don't miss the next episode.